For our Dutch viewers, I know we have quite a feu people using Optmyzr and watching this show in Europe and specifically the Netherlands and Belgium. Shall we speak, gaan we eventjes in Nederlands door?
Ja, een klein beetje Nederlands kan wel, hè? Dat is wel leuk.
Yeah, that's all. So, hey, for our English viewers and everyone else, so we both speak Dutch. I'm Belgian. Marcel is in Amsterdam. So, hey, we had to work that in.
I always, whenever I set up a Performance Max campaign, I feel like I'm sort of pushed into a number of dilemmas, So I know how you can build the perfect keyword setup and a really good shopping setup and a really good setup for YouTube and for dynamic remarketing. But then if you have to set up a Performance Max campaign, then sometimes I feel like, okay, what I'm now doing is the best for search, but now it's not good for shopping anymore. And then I feel like, well, and then it's not really good for remarketing anymore.
Hello and welcome to another episode of PPC Town Hall. My name is Fred Valles. I'm your host. I'm also the CEO and one of the co-founders at Optmyzr. So we're getting pretty close to the holiday shopping season, which is actually kind of crazy given how far that period is still away. But, if you work in digital marketing, you can never be ready soon enough because as we see, consumers, for some reason, they start shopping earlier and earlier every single year for the holidays. So we have an episode today where we're bringing in a great PPC expert, and we're going to ask him what he's doing to get ready for his campaigns and his clients to be ready for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and the holiday shopping season. And one of the angles we wanted to talk about as well is where Performance Max campaigns fit into this. Performance Max being relatively new, but also having been around long enough now to be significant, that might actually be a big part of the strategy. So we wanted to talk to real PPC practitioners and experts about where that might fit in. So welcome to PPC Town Hall, and let's get rolling with this episode. And here's my guest for today, Marcel Smal from Roots Network. Welcome to the show, Marcel.
Hey, yeah, good morning to you. Really, really awesome to be here. Really cool. Yeah.
Great to have you on. So you've been doing PPC for a long time, right? So tell people a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I've been working in PPC for over 10 years already. So started in 2013. And always worked at a big paid search agency. And then a year and a half ago, as of 2022, together with a friend, we decided to start for ourselves. So we started our own paid search agency. And now we're working for a number of really cool retail fashion clients, some B2B clients, and all just aimed at PPC. So yeah.
Nice. And that's called Roots Network, right? And you guys are based in Amsterdam?
Yeah, indeed. And it's called Roots Network because my father used to have a tulip farm, and the friend I started Roots Network with, he also used to work there. So we grew up working in tulips, and we also feel in paid search, it's all about the basics should be good, the roots of your campaigns, everything should be good, and then you can grow on top of it. So that's where that comes from. Yeah.
Nice. I love that. Yeah, get your PPC fundamentals and the roots correct, and then the rest will be much easier.
Yeah.
In fact, also at Optmyzr, we have a couple of different tools, right? And one of them is your audits, and that's exactly what it's for. It's making sure that your structure is right and your fundamentals are good.
It's all
your KPIs can't.
Yeah, indeed. If the basics, if the fundament is good, then you can grow on top of it. So that's also always how we like to approach it. Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
For our Dutch viewers, I know we have quite a few people using Optmyzr and watching this show in Europe and specifically the Netherlands and Belgium. Shall we speak? Gaan we eventjes in Nederlands door?
Ja, een klein beetje Nederlands kan wel, hè? Dat is wel leuk.
Ja, dat is wel leuk. So, hey, for our English viewers and everyone else, so we both speak Dutch. I'm Belgian. Marcel is in Amsterdam. So, hey, we had to work that in. And my team in the Women's World Cup Belgium is not playing in that one, so USA was my team. They went up against the Netherlands. Netherlands is a little bit more successful in that regards. But you guys are much more of a soccer country as well, right?
Yeah. Indeed. Yeah.
And do you want to say who your team is in the regular leagues?
Yeah, it's like
or is it a risky question? Is that going to alienate?
No, yeah, it's okay. Like I live in Amsterdam, but I grew up like more like countryside, and there's a team called AZ in like close to like it's in Optmyzr, and that always used to be my club. Yeah.
Nice. Well, very good. So let's bring it back to PPC here. So the holiday shopping season, right? Like, do you feel like it's happening tomorrow, or where are you guys at as an agency in terms of getting your clients ready for Q4?
Yeah, it's like I feel like with this you can't start like too early. Like I think like people who work in retail or with retail clients in paid search, I think everybody knows like a holiday season where you start too late, for example, and then like the chaos that can happen. Like at a certain point it just starts, and then it's like the one thing after another. Like if your retail client is really promotional heavy, then it's like really intense that period. And if you need stuff like creatives or videos, or you want to know like what kinds of promotions there are going to be, or like what kind of products are going to be in promotion, like you have to start early, otherwise like you're gonna sort of miss the moment, and that's just like really such a pity.
Yeah, and obviously you don't want to miss the moment, but talk a little bit about getting creatives ready. Ready for when? Like, what does it look like in terms of your overall strategy? Like, when do you run certain types of ads, and is that looking earlier this year than last year?
If I look at our clients, like it's kind of like an entire well, it depends per client, of course, but it's often sort of like a whole holiday season, sort of like starting as of November, and then you've got like pre-promos, then you've got like your promotion, and then like sort of like the times that come after that, sort of. And also with your creatives, those are going to be different, like it's going to be different discounts that's going to be communicated, like it's going to be like the tone of voice might be different, so you want to make sure that everything is created like well in advance, also because in the moment itself, like it's too difficult like to get those assets, for example. So you really have to start well in advance. And also what I kind of like to mention here is like certain strategies, like with your promotional period, are also going to be about, like getting leads in, for example, or like making sure that your app strategy is going to be okay, or like certain things with automation, like that you have to make sure that it's like all finished already. Like that's really for the period before the promotion start. Like now is when you can do it, and not when it's already starting. So I think that's also really important to now already have a strategy for that. Otherwise, like you're going to be too late with that.
Right. I mean, so the way that I think about that, you talked about roots, right? So you want to get those roots and those fundamental components in place. And so first you want to have your strategy, like what is it we're going to do? And that is really about how many campaigns, what types of campaigns are we using PMAX, what type of bid management are we going to have? And all of those things, those fundamentals, those roots need to be in place right now. Because obviously you're not going to come to November and then all of a sudden say, oh, well, we're going to go from TCPA bidding to TROAS. We're going to make that shift at that point. No, that's
exactly. Like you kind of sort of have like a milestone where you have to work towards, like some of the things that you really wanted to have in place. Like so everybody's got like big projects going on, for example, and like, okay, we kind of have to have it finished before this date. Otherwise, we're gonna have to do it like in promo season, and then it's gonna be mayhem. Like that's not gonna work. So those things you want to have finished in time, but also certain things like for example, if you have an app, like what's your app strategy gonna be before the promotional period, for example. So I think it's really cool to think about, for example, that during the promotion, like it's really good to have your own channels to use it the most, like to have your app, to have like the app note, the push notifications, for example. But then it could be part of your strategy to now make sure that you get more app downloads, for example. So then you have to think like, okay, maybe now we have to use more universal app campaigns, for example. So those are also things to kind of think about, because you have to start that now, and otherwise you're going to be too late with that.
Yeah, what I'm hearing there is a strategy that mirrors what we talked about in a recent episode about video ads. And the point was a little bit, use your the preseason, like right now, use this to build audiences. And for video, that was just like people who watch videos, you put them on an audience list because they might be in, right? It's kind of upper funnel. And what you're describing here is use this early stage to have an app campaign or a universal campaign and get people on the app, because then when the actual promotion drops, you don't have to go and pay those high CPCs when everybody else is advertising on Black Friday, Cyber Monday.
Yeah.
But the notification actually shows up directly on the user's phone.
Yeah. I think like indeed, like I think it's kind of with app, then you can use your own channels, but also if you've got your web to app deep linking implemented in the right way, like afterwards, people deep linking into your app, like the conversion rates in general are going to be higher. So that will also work. Like that's already like a good optimization to have already. But in a time when, like all other competitors are going to be like really out there as well, I think there is then you can make a little bit of a difference there, like that's going to have a big impact. And the same goes with the audiences. If you now can get people in, if you can now fill your audiences, or if you can now get like people to get leads. And I think that's not now, but I mean in the period leading up to to Black Friday, for example, people are already sometimes wanting to find out like, okay, what kind of Black Friday deals are there, for example. I know that like with a telecom provider, like for them, Black Friday, like they knew there was going to be a big deal for the new iPhone, for example. And people also really wanted to go for that, but they couldn't communicate it yet. But then they did have a landing page where people could get, like where they could leave their email address, and then they would get emails like leading up to that moment. And then that is an audience that you can then also use again during Black Friday. And then it's pretty cool. Like then you've got this audience of like really engaged people, and then you can advertise on basically everything, like even if it's too far away from your product, like you're going to be able to advertise profitably there.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because Black Friday used to be this one moment in time, and it used to be very US focused around the Thanksgiving holiday. But then obviously it went global, and now Amazon basically made a fake holiday, which is Prime Day, which is almost exactly 6 months from Christmas. And the whole point was that they saw there's always this sales lull that happens in summer. People are just buying less stuff. And they made a fake holiday. They were like, we're going to call it Prime Day. And then all of the other merchants, all of the other retailers, at least in the United States, they said, well, let's start calling it Black Friday in July. And so I think what you're describing is that Black Friday is now like this generic concept of like, what's the best deal that you can offer me? And no matter what time of the year it is, you can put your name on the list. And if that deal is not available today, the day that it becomes available, you'll be notified, right? And that's actually fascinating, because that means that, do you think PPC is still going to be as big on Black Friday and Cyber Monday itself if you've kind of been preloading it with these audiences?
Yeah, I think it's also like I think that's also kind of a thing. Like some advertisers think too much, like that those days that's where everything's gonna happen. But actually, like you already see, like all the search behavior, like the volumes start rising before that already, and afterwards as well. So it's not only on those 2 days, like it's surrounding that period as well. I think that's pretty important to take like for people to kind of look at, like, okay, what were the search volumes like last year, for example? Like, when do people actually start searching for it already? When do people start like having orienting kind of searches, then buying sort of purchases? And that's and then you like what we saw last year, for example, like it's a much longer period. And I think that is also something from our end that we have to share with, like, you know, with category managers, for example. Like, okay, be aware, it's not only like these days, like people are going to be like in market like much longer, so we also can profit from that longer. Yeah.
Interesting. And so say that you're this telecom provider, right? And there's going to be a great deal on the iPhone. How important do you think is timing of all of this? Because obviously there's multiple telecom providers. They can all compete on a slightly better deal. Right? You might have that list that you built up saying, hey, we're going to have a great deal, but you haven't said how much the deal is. How much are consumers going to say potentially, well, okay, this other one came in and said they had a good deal and it was pretty good. Maybe not the best that could be, but looks good enough to me, so I just bought it, right? And now that other company that waited until Black Friday basically lost half their audience to this competitor.
Yeah, I think maybe that's also why you said like it looks like it's starting every year a bit earlier, because I can imagine that advertisers also like then kind of try to start earlier as well. And then, yeah, and then like you kind of don't want to start like too early that you're like ahead of the market, but then you also don't want to have like competitors sort of cut you off. Like it's kind of like like a fine line sort of. Yeah.
Exactly. It's that fine line where you don't want to give more of a discount than would have been necessary to get that sale, right? You don't want to wait too long. And this makes me sort of think about like predictive analytics, right? Is that something that you're using? Because you said you look at historical patterns of data. And so in Optmyzr, we have tools that look at a couple of years of history and show the seasonality expectations for your industry, your account. But to what degree are like predictive and maybe more of the machine learning systems that we see now, how much can that help people figure out how much to discount and when to start the discounting?
That's something that we don't like use like in like that concretely. Basically, what we kind of look at is, okay, like historical search volumes, for example, and then also we try to work like together with Google. You know, like if you're a bigger advertiser, and that's that's also kind of like they start around this period. You know, like in the coming month, Google will start contacting you, like, are you preparing for the holiday season? And some of the some of the suggestions they give, you know, like are no-brainers, but like they do give you quite some good insights of what you can expect of search volumes, what will be happening, for example. So that way we kind of try to, you know, like close the gaps and, you know, like get it better every year, basically.
Yeah. And I completely agree with that. I mean, so Google and Microsoft are certainly going to put out these reports and they will say, hey, you got to use PMax, you got to use automated bidding, the sort of the things we've heard again and again. And where we also know, I mean, automated bidding, for sure, like that works really well. PMax, you know, that can be debated, and we'll debate that here in a minute. So like take that for what it is, right? It's Google speak, it's Microsoft speak. But what is really important is this huge amount of data that they sit on where they understand what is that search behavior? What is that consumer journey looking like this year versus last year? Like definitely pay attention to that, because individually we just don't have that much insight on these things. So let's talk a little bit then about, you know, these big days that are still going to happen, right? So even if people are shopping earlier, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, these are still going to be like keystone events. Do you do anything like seasonality bid adjustments, data exclusions? Do you get more aggressive with your TROAS targets? Like, what do you do on these days?
Like it also definitely depends on like the type of advertiser, you know, and you also kind of have to be honest with, okay, how good are the deals that we're going to be having this year? So, but we've got one advertiser, for example, like they've got like super good deals, and during those days.
Can you say who it is? Can you say who it is?
Yeah, it's called Otium. It's a fashion outlet. So they already have like really good deals on fashion, but then during the holiday season, like it gets even better. And then it's really interesting, but like everything sort of like sticks during that period, like that's like it performs all really well, but in that case, like it's gonna get really big. So in those cases, we make sure we're gonna set like more aggressive ROAS targets, for example, and then during those days, we're gonna just start with seasonality adjustments, and then also during those days, we just check it hourly, basically. So we check like day over day, like how are we progressing in spend. And there is sort of like a delay in your conversions that you're measuring, like during the day, but then you have to kind of be in touch, like with the advertiser, like, okay, how are your sales going today? And like, how are we progressing in spend during this day? And based on that, we're gonna decide like to, like have higher seasonality adjustments or lower seasonality adjustments. But like the spend on those days can be like so high that you have to be really on top of it to make sure that you're not, like either spending way too much or too little and miss the moment. But I have to say, seasonality adjustments, I really love it. Like I think it's like one of those tools where I feel like, or features where I feel like that is where Google really listened to like what a specialist had to say. I think like automated bid management is a no-brainer, or like for 90% of the advertisers, you should do like automated bid management. But like adjusting to those really big changes, like up or down, it was always struggling. And with seasonality adjustment, you can see it react like so quickly. Like if you set a seasonality adjustment, it will like, in my experience, it will start working in like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So you can, for those moments where the performance is so much better than what the bidding algorithm is actually thinking, then you can have like that amount of control, which makes a big difference, I feel.
Nice. So the seasonality bid adjustments and then data exclusions, right? Do you use those in combination with each other?
It depends. I often see if the fluctuations aren't too big, then if you had like a positive seasonality adjustment, then afterwards, if it's not implemented anymore, then it will start lowering the spend really quickly as well. So then it's not necessary to have a data exclusion event. But if it is like, if a lot happened, like if the performance was that good, then you can sometimes see like, okay, now it is really struggling with slowing down, and with the biggest changes there, like with the biggest impact, then we will implement a data exclusion event. Or sometimes we will set like a negative seasonality adjustment.
Nice. So another question I had for you, Marcel, was about different campaign types and maybe some of the stuff you run before Black Friday to build some of these audiences. You use anything like video, discovery, any of those campaign types?
Both. Like and like remarketing campaigns and like GDN prospecting campaigns. But yeah, I think it is important to mention with those campaign types, you do have to already think about like what that is going to perform like during the holiday season. So for example, discovery campaigns, I like it to use it like mostly during when you have something to offer, basically. So during like those moments you have something to offer. So then I feel like it works really well. Otherwise, sometimes I feel like the performance isn't quite there. But then you also have to take into account that discovery campaigns do have a ramp up period. So I think people who have experience with discovery campaigns, they know like it will take a few days before it starts going, And it is, you only have like the automated bidding option. So target CPA, target ROAS, or maximize conversions, maximize conversion values, I think. And so there isn't an option like sometimes where you think like, oh no, like we have to ramp it up right now. Okay, I'm going to do like manual bidding, like really high bids and get it started. Like you don't have that option. You can set more aggressive targets, but it will still take a few days sometimes. So I would definitely recommend with those campaign types, or like, and then especially discovery ads, use a ramp up period where, like a few weeks leading up, that you will have it running already, like general creatives, maybe also with much lower spend, but then it will just start getting traction. And then when you need to, like then you change the creatives, and then you can set the targets more aggressive, your budget higher, and then you can go. But I've had that like one season, like with a big campaign. Yeah, everything was ready to go, like, and we felt like, yeah, this is like a good strategy with all the campaign types that we're having. And then like discovery campaigns, like the last hours of the promotion, it was like doing something, and then we had to pause it again. So that's something that I learned like the hard way.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Thanks for sharing that on how, because a lot of times, like with search ads, you're just used to turning it on and there's almost an instantaneous approval, but clearly a little bit different for discovery ads.
Yeah, and that's also kind of something that and that's also something that I found out the hard way. But that's changing your ads, for example, during like let's say Black Friday. That there is sometimes a risk of, like if you're a retailer and you're selling like brands, if you change like a lot in your ad copy, then it might get reapproved again, for example, and you might get into like things of approval settings that you're approval. Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the stuff that you again don't want happening, like especially like during those days, like a lot of things are happening with support, so you might not get the support, and then it might be with your most important brands that you are not able to like show your promotional ads, and that's also something that you have to take into account. And what we do with a number of advertisers that we use, like ad customizers, then you already have like that piece of like, okay, we want to communicate this at these places, like the promotions, and then during the promotions you just change the ad customizer, and there you don't have the problems with reapproval.
That's another great piece of advice, Marcel, there. Just get ready and use those ad customizers. And also like promotion feeds or price feeds getting disapproved. That's one of the things we recently put in Optmyzr. So we now have like a feed audit system that will automatically tell you if things are getting disapproved for price or for some other reason. And clearly that's a really important thing to get ready for the Q4 season. Are there any like tools that you use? Are you a user of scripts or anything to like automate maybe some of these checks that you do to keep? Because you talked about like checking hourly, right? Like that seems pretty intense if you're not automating. So how do you guys go about
that? We there's a few tools that we use. Like for campaign building, we use like mostly Channable. So that's like a feed management tool and a campaign automation tool. So for that part, we use that. And then there's always like sort of like scalable automation that we see that can happen. Like, for example, like adding negative lists, like in a really specific kind of way. For that, we use scripts. I can't write code myself, even with ChatGPT, I can't do it. I like how now people explain like, okay, you everybody can now be a coder. Well, I can't, but I do know, like we do know like how to explain the business rules, and then we know a really good coder who can create those scripts for us. And then like in the past we've used like Optmyzr, TrueClicks for like auditing and like those kind of like little like scalable optimizations that you can do.
Nice. Yeah. And I love that whole point about you still need to know how to do code to write scripts, even despite GPT. And so I've been playing with that, and I'm doing a few sessions here and there, but it is interesting because the more specific you are in your instructions, the better the GPT generated code seems to be. So I'll keep plugging away at that. I'll keep teaching, and hopefully like eventually everybody in the world will scripts.
I know, like at a talk here in the Netherlands, you said like that you use ChatGPT like to build your own script, and then like we needed a script, and I thought like, okay, I'm gonna try this with ChatGPT, and then like it was really kind, like that, like it kept failing, and then like ChatGPT kept saying, oh no, you're right, like you have to do this, and then after like 20 iterations, I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna ask like a developer. And then with a few little things, like he said like, okay, you have to do it like this and that, and then it worked. But for me, it kind of did show like, I don't know, like, so I feel like some people feel like, okay, with ChatGPT, like you can be like, you can do everything sort of, but I feel like, yeah, it will like really make specialists even much better specialists, you know? And that's also with people who can write code, for example. Like if they use it, then they're much more efficient, or like they can do much cooler things, for example. But you do have to have like certain, like really specific skills to still like also get the most out of that tool, for example.
Yeah, super good point. And I mean, I think that comes down to the fact that it hallucinates, or it's not like always factually correct. So if you go in as someone who doesn't know the topic and you ask it to write about something, sure, it looks great what it spit out, but is it actually true? Is it correct? You don't know about that. Yeah. And then in the case of script, so I had an instance where I said, write me a script and pull like the 2 date ranges and compare them to each other, so you could tell me things about it. And in my initial prompt, I said like, pull me these 2 date ranges, and it would just like do one query, 2 scripts to the AdWords API, and try to get the 2 date ranges in one query. And like, I know as a scripts developer, that doesn't work. You have to do 2 independent queries, and then you have to combine them together. But so I could identify that mistake in the code that it had written. And then I was like, well, how do I get it to actually separate this out? So I literally said in my next prompt, like, first ask for this data, and then ask for this data for the next date range, and then combine them. And then it was able to really write it correctly. And so it sped up my development.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. If you couldn't identify that, oh, you need to do 2 calls instead of 1, like you just at that point.
And then that's your skill, you know, like that's what you have to offer, is like you notice like right away, like, okay, this is where it's wrong, and now I can give a better prompt, and then it works, you know. But otherwise it's still gonna take like, a lot of time, I think. Yeah.
Hey, let's talk for just a couple of minutes here, maybe about Performance Max. And again, I said at the beginning that this is a campaign type that's relatively new, but it's now been around long enough that you could legitimately run your whole Q4 shopping campaign and shopping season on a PMax campaign. So I was curious what your thoughts are, and what's your strategy around PMax?
Like we use Performance Max for, I feel like 50% for our customers. And then like there are like, first of all, like for like how we feel about Performance Max, like for some clients, it works like pretty well. And then like we use it sort of like as part of our strategy. For others, like for some reasons, like sometimes we have to have like, for sort of like legal reasons, we have to like keep control over the search terms, for example, like in Google Shopping. So those are really examples where we have to use, like have to keep on using regular shopping, for example. But we do like test it always, and then like see how good it works. And then, and in some cases it works pretty well. In general, like I feel like some insights are definitely still missing. Some features are a bit missing. And I always, like whenever I set up like a Performance Max campaign, I feel like I'm sort of pushed into like a number of dilemmas, you know? So I know like how you can build like the perfect keyword setup, and like a really good shopping setup, and a really good like setup for YouTube and for dynamic remarketing. But then if you have to set up a Performance Max campaign, then sometimes I feel like, okay, what I'm now doing is the best for search, but now it's not good for like shopping anymore. And then I feel like, well, and then it's not really good for remarketing anymore. Like to give like a really quick example for that, like you want your asset groups like to have like mutually exclusive, like if you're retail, you've got products, then you want your asset groups to be mutually exclusive with the products, you know? And then I'm sometimes thinking like, okay, but then for remarketing, like how's that gonna work? You know, like then are people gonna only be shown the products from that asset group, or also like more of the products? Because that's what you kind of want to have happen with remarketing, and especially if you have like an asset group, which is like sort of like your rest of your products. You know, like you've got like an asset group for like a number of your big brands or big categories, but then you also have like your long tail of products which don't perform really well. You'd still want to advertise on it. And then I'm thinking like, okay, are people who visit those products gonna get also remarketed with like those other products which aren't like, which basically are the worst selling products, you know? That's like, I sometimes feel like a bit conflicted when I'm setting up like the Performance Max campaigns. Like, yeah.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense as a dilemma. And I think it also speaks to your point about the lack of insights. And if we really knew the answer to that question, then maybe we'd be more comfortable with it, right?
Yeah.
Now, I know there's one script that everyone seems to love that Mike Rhodes had put out.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah. So for anyone who hasn't seen that, do you want to tell people what that is about?
Yeah, it's a script that you can implement in your account, and then it will show you like deeper insights in Performance Max, which you otherwise can't see. So like asset group performance, and like really importantly, like the performance over the different types of inventory. And it gives, I feel like you have to use this script basically, because sometimes it can just tell you like, okay, just don't use Performance Max, for example. Like I've had like one client where we saw like immediately like, yeah, 99% of the traffic, cost, conversions, everything is coming from shopping basically. And then you kind of know like, okay, we're making this really big trade-off, like of all these insights that we're not getting, like all that search term data, you know, like that's an asset in itself, you know, like that's really useful data. And we're giving that up for like 1% that is sometimes shown like in video, sometimes like in display. And I feel like that script like shows you like, okay, it gives like much, it makes it a bit more transparent, you know?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And so your point is then basically like, listen, if PMax serves as a shopping campaign, then why not have an actual shopping campaign with all the data, all the controls? Mm-hmm. And yes, it's a bit more complexity at the beginning, but ultimately that's what agencies, that's what PPC experts, that's where we make our living, right? Is being better than the average. And PMax is fantastic. Listen, if you can't hire an agency, if you don't have that much time to set up the correct campaign structure, then PMax is like a godsend. It's just going to do a lot of stuff for you and get you pretty decent results. But if you want to get that next level and basically unlevel the playing field and tip it back in your favor, then go and use those individual campaign types.
I think so as well. And also like you also have to like, for example, with retail clients, you know, like retail brands, sometimes, you know, like shopping in itself can be the most important marketing channel. You know, like it isn't weird for non-generic shopping to sometimes get like 30, 40, 50% of the total sales, you know, like if it's if it's a type, like if it's an online retailer. And then I feel like it's so important for your business, and also with that feedback of the search terms that you can see, that I feel like, okay, like just be cautious if you go into Performance Max and really know that you're really getting incremental sales basically.
Yeah. Well, good. That brings us pretty close here to the end of the episode. So you've been a fantastic guest, Marcel. If people wanted to catch up with you and talk a little bit more about some of these things, where can they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Marcel Smal, or you could visit our website, rootstripenetwork.com. Really cool. Like if you want to spar about anything, then we love talking about PPC. So Yes.
And good Dutch search events, Friends of Search. I know you go to that one, I go to that one, so people should definitely check it out. Get to say hello in person. I'm guessing that's going to happen again next year in February is usually the timing.
Yeah.
Roughly. Well, good. But again, thanks for sharing all these tips on getting ready for the holiday shopping season and how PMax fits into that. Lots of really specific tips. So I think we're very active. If people want to see more of these episodes, use the buttons below on YouTube. You can subscribe and you'll get notified. You can also visit our website, ppctownhall.com. We have a mailing list there. You can see all of the old episodes. And then, of course, if you want to streamline some of these things that Marcel talked about or some other things, that's what Optmyzr does. We're a tool company, so we have a 2-week free trial. Go check it out and give us a try. So